Welcome back to my channel. Today I have 3 new Easter DIYs for you. For the first DIY, I'm taking this Easter sign from the Dollar Tree, and it looks okay, but to me it looks a little blah with the background and the frame. But I do really like this middle portion of the sign, so I'm just going to go ahead and remove all of the paper from the frame. And I replace it with this black and white buffalo check scrapbook paper from Hobby Lobby. And I mark out where I need to cut the paper just by using my fingers to push along the inside edge of the frame. I use Waverly chalk paint in the color ink to paint the outside of the frame. Going in with a makeup sponge and that same color ink, I just lightly tap along the outside edge of this inner sign. It's a really good idea to tap off some of that color on your sponge before you apply it to the sign. I really wanted to upgrade the look of the sign and bring more continuity with the color. In my opinion, painting the frame black to match the ink of this inner sign looks much better. You can really see how the black around the outside edge makes this sign stand out even more. I go around the border a second time to deepen up that color and bring it into the sign a little bit more. I use Mod Podge to attach the paper to the sign. It does dry very quickly, so it's best to work in small sections so you can work out any air bubbles as you go. Anything worth doing is worth doing right. I've seen so many tutorials out there where they just don't take the time to work all of the air bubbles out, and in my opinion, that does not look good and it really detracts from the look of the piece. Now I'm going in with some gray paint. I also do go in with a brown paint, which you'll see at the end, and maybe a little bit of black, and I'm just lightly going over the lines that are already there. I do create my own as well. This makes it look more like an authentic wooden piece. Because this sign is made of a glossy paper, you can easily wipe any mistakes off while it's still wet. Here's a look at the sign, and I think the detail that I've added makes it look like a rustic wood sign. To finish the piece, you just need to glue the sign in place and add a hanger to the back if you want. I think the changes give the sign a more neutral Easter look that stands out quite a bit more and would look great with any farmhouse decor. For project number 2, I'm going to use this bunny head wreath from the Dollar Tree, and I'm taking some chenille yarn. This is the big ball size from Michaels, and I did not even use a full skein of it. You'll see how much I have left over at the end. I just wrapped the tail around some of the inner wire. It will be covered anyway. You could also glue it to the frame if you like. I did not use a lot of glue for this project because I found that when you wrap this yarn and keep it nice and snug, you really don't have a need to glue it in place. There may be some areas where you want to make some adjustments, but for the most part, I did not use much glue for this project. You don't need to do what I'm doing here, which is using the full skein of yarn and pulling it through the areas each time. It is a pain in the butt, but it was really important to me at the time to use one piece of yarn rather than having smaller pieces of yarn that you have to glue onto the frame. Because the yarn is so thick and fluffy, you shouldn't be able to tell where you glued on additional pieces if you hide them well, but I just felt like using one piece. As I wrap the yarn, I'm keeping it really snug and tight. When you get to the ears, you're just going to start inserting the yarn through each bunny ear, as well as the center between the ears. To wrap the ears, I decided to weave it through the middle of the ear. I wrap the yarn around the left edge, go through the middle of the ear, and then wrap it around the right edge. You could also weave it around the outside of the ear. You will have to use a lot more glue to hold it in place, and I just think weaving it through the ear gives it a more interesting look. When you finish the ear, you just cut the yarn off and glue it into place. I used Fabri-Tac glue and tucked that tail in so that you can't see where it is. Make any adjustments to the yarn and glue it in place if there are any bare areas. But if you keep the yarn snug when you're wrapping it, you really shouldn't have many areas that need to be glued. Here's the yarn I have left over from one skein, so you do have quite a bit to work with. I found this ribbon at Walmart and I really like it. It is very stiff, which can make it difficult to work with. Full disclosure, I am not a bow maker. I am terrible at it, so you probably will never see me make anything but a very simple bow. I'm sure there are plenty of tutorials on YouTube that show how to make a proper bow. I'm always happy to get through it. For me, making a bow is about as enjoyable as painting eyes, which means it's not at all enjoyable for me. I made a very simple hanger by taking a pipe cleaner, twisting it at the bottom, and gluing it to the back of the bunny. Here's a look at the finished project. Now my bow is a little messy there. I should have straightened it up for a final view, but I didn't. Using a black and white ribbon makes this a nice neutral decor piece. For project number 3, I'm taking this Let It Snow sign from the Dollar Tree. I like that the grooves are already in it, so I've just removed the hanger and I'm going to fill in the holes using some spackle. Of course, being from Dollar Tree, there was a bunch of glitter over each of the letters, so I just took a paper towel and was able to wipe most of it off. I do go over it with a little bit of fine grit sanding paper just to make sure it was all removed. But it came off really easy for this particular sign. I give the sign a base coat of white Waverly chalk paint, and I ended up having to do 3 or possibly even 4 coats just to cover up that dark blue. I used 4 bunny ornaments from the Dollar Tree. 2 of them will be covered with the same scrapbook paper that I used in my first project, and I paint the other 2. I use Mod Podge to attach the scrapbook paper to 2 of the bunnies. And I'm just pressing that scrapbook paper on, making sure it's down good and firm so I don't have any air bubbles or loose edges. I paint 2 of the bunnies using ink chalk paint. I forgot to fill in the hole at the top. I did fill it in with spackle. I don't know why, but I almost always forget to fill it in until after I've started painting. Use an X-Acto knife to cut the scrapbook paper around the other 2 bunnies. I do sand along the edges of the bunnies with the scrapbook paper. I did not do that for my painted bunnies. I decided to use some pom-poms from the Dollar Tree for my little bunny tails, and I'm using some very thin ribbon to make bows for each of them. I started off with all of them having a white bow, but I end up changing that later in the project. This is likely one of the only times you'll see me making a bow is when it's just a really simple bow with thin ribbon. So the two black bunnies are going to have white bows, and you'll see me put a white bow on the scrapbook paper bunny here, but I do change that. Using pencil lead is a very easy way to distress a sign. And you can't really see it very clearly here because it's very light. I start out very light, and I'm just going around the whole sign, the edges as well as the middle, and adding some distressing marks. I started painting the seams using the black ink chalk paint, but I really didn't like it. It seemed a little too stark to me, so I ended up changing to melted chocolate brown from Apple Barrel Paints and mixed it in with some water. That made it much easier to apply, and I really like the look of the brown much better. I want some of that brown to go outside of the crease, so that does look like an aged sign. With a sponge brush, I'm going to apply more of that brown paint to the edges as well as the front of the sign, and I'm just going in really lightly, just bringing some of that color down from the edge. So after you've put a little bit of paint on your brush, it's probably a good idea to tap it off a little bit on a paper towel so that you can better control where the paint goes on your sign. And I'm just pulling it inward on the edges. I do add a lot more distressing than what I show you, and you'll see how nice it looks at the end. I don't think you guys want to watch me distress a sign for an hour. I go in with that sponge brush into the cracks, and I pull that brown color out a little bit on the front of the sign. In my opinion, distressing looks a lot better when you do it in layers. So at the end, you'll see that I do have different layers of color mixed together, and it gives a really nice antique look. And now you can really start seeing some of that distressing along the front of the sign. I go in with the color mineral as well as that brown and just lightly add some distressing marks all over the front of the sign. I wanted the distressing to look really light and subtle on this piece. I think it's really easy to get carried away with some of the distressing using the brown, and I really didn't want that look for this piece. Just take your time and go on really lightly with each color. It's time to add the bunnies, so I glue the tails on each of them. And I found these letters at Walmart. They're a foam sticker letter, and I really liked how they looked. I loved the simplicity of it. Unfortunately, each set only has one capital T, and I really didn't want that small T on trail. I think it just doesn't look right. So I had to purchase 2 packets of the sticker letters just to spell out the bunny trail using capital letters. Using these little carrots from the Dollar Tree, I did the same thing that I did with the bunnies. I covered 2 of them with that same scrapbook paper, and then I painted 2 of them and just added some small little polka dots. I glued 2 of them to each upper corner of the sign. And here's where I decided to change the bows on the bunny. I was going to put a black and white ribbon on these, but then I decided just black looked better. It makes it stand out a little bit more on the scrap paper bunnies. I make sure each of them is placed about the same width apart and centered on the sign before I glue them down. Here's a final look at the sign. I did drill 2 holes at the top and added a wire hanger. I really like how the distressing turned out on the sign. I hope you enjoyed these projects. Please let me know in the comments below which one was your favorite. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.